So, welcome to Monkey and Frank. My name is Dope, and my body is Dom, and I'm insane. And today I've got Matt coming back again. Thank you for coming back, Matt. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Dom. Thanks for having me back.
It's a pleasure. So, before we started the podcast, we were talking about anxiety from our conversation with Brandon, and you were mentioning a lot of great things. So, I wanted you to talk about it. I wanted you to teach me to tell me what's up when it comes to that subject.
Yeah, man. Um, so I'm going to share some of the things I've been learning in grad school. I'm in a program right now for couples and family therapy. And we've been looking at the family as an organism. And so the idea is that, so do you remember the adage, the apple does not fall far from the tree?
Yes.
Okay. So in this case, the individual could be seen as the apple, right? And your generation, your ancestors, the generations preceding you, would be the tree or the branches on the tree. And you just keep going back and back, and eventually you find the single ancestor that we all come from, something like that. So with this in mind, um, what my understanding of anxiety, how it enters the system, is at a very early age. So like you're a dad, right? You have two children, I believe.
Yes.
So how old are your kids?
So my kid, one of them is 4, and the other one is 2.
Beautiful. So then I'm sure you'll have plenty to share from your own personal experience as a dad, as well as maybe memories of your childhood. But the idea is that so we come into the world completely dependent, right? And when we have needs in those, like especially in those first couple of years, um, how do we communicate? Like, how did your kids get your attention?
Well, the first few years, the first year, I noticed that the only way that they can get my attention is by crying. And
Yeah,
then once they become aware, I noticed that the next phase is they try to grab my attention by making me laugh,
yeah.
or and that one I love more. But still, it's hard because sometimes they do something that's bad, and you laugh without doing it on purpose, but then they caught on and they continue doing that behavior because they like making you laugh, and I see it that it's me that fucked up. But anyways, continue what you're saying.
That's perfectly, like, that's exactly right. So kids can't, they don't have the language hasn't been developed for them to go, hey, I need water, or I'm uncomfortable, I need my diaper changed, right? So we cry as kids. So anxiety enters the system. This is um, from the family, like a family as a system of emotions perspective. But anxiety enters the family or the individual when mom and dad neglect to see that there's a need with the kid. So if and this isn't like necessarily malicious. It can be neglectful, but in our in our model of modern in our flow of like in what's being demanded of us work wise as a family, right? Mom and dad are working, they've got worries, concerns, and so they're so busy, it's possible that baby gets missed at some point, and that leaves an impact or an impression, what could be considered a trauma, but we'll use the language impact. And the reason it's a trauma or an impact is because it's non-consensual, in my opinion. And it's something this Corey and I have talked about this as well. He gets mentioned a lot in our conversations and in the podcast. But as a baby, there's no language to give consent, right? It's just you're dependent. So when there's a need and it goes missed, then the imprint goes pretty much, I can't, I'm not getting my needs met. And that gets pushed, or it gets laid down into the subconscious, right? And so that can be one example of how anxiety comes into the system. Another example, so that's directly with mom and dad and needs getting missed. Actually, before I move on, because there's more, what are your thoughts of that explanation? I know it's probably not something new for you to hear, and I'm
No,
sure being a,
it's not, but I have questions concerning, like, personally, what is anxiety? Sometimes I fear like people interpret anxiety on for different things. Like for me, I always made anxiety like a physical symptoms that kind of happens in the gut of my stomach
yeah,
that made it so that I'm uncomfortable, and I get jittery, maybe I get hotter.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, like there's physical symptoms, And then for sometimes I feel like also anxiety is, let's say, the when the inner critic doesn't want to shut up. So then it's more mental. So and as well, like as you were saying, your beginning phase of ancestries, anxiety could also be like a DNA thing, meaning again physical, but like really not just because of the parents. Like you are born with kind of set of who you are that makes it so that your body behaves a certain way, but more to that is how you perceive it. So let's say you have a baby that perceives it in a more calm way. The anxiety can be the same between two individuals but perceived differently. So what do you mean? Like I want to know more about that.
Okay, so a few things. So let's start with the DNA. So this is where the generational um, anxiety or generational patterning and traumas can be really helpful to understand and see how we're being affected today. Like the idea with the family as an organism, as one big system, is that it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like Dom doesn't exist in a vacuum. What's given rise to your personality structure are a multitude of external forces, and the ideally, or not ideally, arguably the parents being the most impactful, because that's your first contact with the outside world. Really, are your parents. So whether and moving as far as the DNA, again, looking back at the tree, looking back at the branches of which you've been born on. Yes, DNA. So like that DNA came from your parents, which came from their parents, and so on and so forth, right? So it is important to understand that this is one dynamic that is very real. That and it does two things that you can tie it back into spirituality. Like when you do the healing, you're not just doing the work for Dom, for the self. You're doing work generationally, and that's the idea of breaking generational patterning. Um,
But you can
so I'm
even
going to
push it further. Like I've noticed people talking as well that as you're healing your generational trauma, so your past, you're actually doing work for your ancestors for them to be more at peace on the other side. Now, of course, it can never be proven, but because you're the kind of the head of the arrow of all of your ancestors pushing forward. But I tend to believe that, like on, yeah.
100%. So that was I'm on the same page. That's I would suggest as well, or I would be in agreement with you that mentality is also supported by many spiritual practices. That again, you don't exist separate. The work you're doing on self most definitely, most definitely uh, is is for your ancestors as well. Like they're supporting you, and that's the idea of like I'm reading this great book right now that ties into what we're talking about. It's called Consciousness Medicine: Indigenous Wisdom, Entheogens, and Expanded States of Consciousness for Healing and Growth. And I'm going to butcher the author's name because it's French, I think. It's by Francois Borzat. And she talks about the importance of how you come to the altar and how you connect with your heart intention. And when you do ceremony and you make your intention clear, like I had a ceremony recently, my intention was faith. I realized a lot of my suffering is when I stopped trusting that I am supported by God and the universe and by the manifestations of God and my family and friends. Like I've got so much support, and so I I laid the intention down of I help me see with clear eyes, um, strengthen my faith. And that was my intention. And she also encourages when you do ceremony, you offer tobacco, sacred tobacco, which is the Native Americans offered tobacco, and as well as burning sage to invite your ancestors, your allies, to support you on your journey. And so I'm attempting to pair the psychological school of thought and framework with the spiritual, and I think they're quite a nice marriage, to be honest. Um, so yeah, that is also to say, like, you and I are in agreement around the work we do is not just for self, it's for all of our ancestors preceding us and our existing family as well. Because you tell me, but as you've done your work, as you're doing your work, it's ongoing. Um, I imagine your wife, your friends, and people who are around you are having conversations, and you can't help but be what you are and share what you're learning and where you're growing. And I imagine so that's going to have a ripple effect on everybody.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Um, so back to anxiety and
Yes.
impacts. Okay, so that the idea is at a very early age, we have impacts in our life, all of us. And if you accept this idea, then if you zoom out and look at the branches of your parents, and you think, wait a minute, why, maybe there was neglectful parenting. Maybe they were so overwhelmed or depressed or had an alcohol. Like you start looking at dysfunctional behavior and mental illness in the family, you start to see there's patterns that go back and back and back and back. Um, and so you can see, like, wait a minute, it's not just by like, there's something wrong with me, I'm just broken. It's that within the family, there has been impacts along the way, and healing has not taken place to resolve that. Okay, so you asked earlier, or you didn't ask, but you said let's define what anxiety is. Like, what is it? My understanding of anxiety is unresolved tension, unresolved energy states in the body, and unresolved energy in the family as a whole. So when you're doing the work, you're resolving generational traumas. You're resolving um, the tension that's gone not looked at. Uh, does that resonate at all, or make sense, or do you
It
have any
resonates.
pushback? Or
No, it resonates so much. I like how you use the word tension as well,
yeah,
because it does feel like a tension. It feels like it's not flowing. Something is constricting at somewhere. It could be in your neck, in your balls, in your stomach, you name it. There's a
yeah,
tension there that makes it so that the energy or not. And it's funny because a lot, like not a lot of people, but uh, it's hard to define energy, but tension is very relatable.
yes, exactly. So how you carry tension in the body, because there's another book too called "The Body Keeps the Score." I think, are you
Yeah,
familiar with that title?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I've only read pieces of it and listened to parts of it on audiobook, but the idea is like, or my, so I that title came back to me. I'm not going to go too far into the book, but um, how you carry that tension in your body. I mean, you may not even realize it. It might be in your posture. You're slumped over, maybe, and then it manifests in like shorter breathing. Right, you're not getting good circulation. Could be like you said, you're holding tension in your gut, like, and you don't even realize it. You're just holding it all the time. And I think you mentioned that with Brandon or with me. Um, or someone on the podcast where you said, for the longest time, you just had this tension in, like, is that right? Am I
Well,
recalling?
there's two types. Like on top of like Brandon was feeling a tension again in his gut, and same with you. But more than that, that tension was causing my muscle to constrict. So the tension became a physical constriction that I realized this year that I was holding, like my abdominal, uh, my lower stomach pain. There was a constriction there that my muscle were activating that I was not realizing, and
Yeah,
the tension really can play in many parts. One, tension like as if your organs are stuck and you can't move forward. Two, your muscle could be constricting to create a physical tension, like so yeah, on so many levels.
yeah. So I mean, you and I have talked about and experienced firsthand ways to change the body's programming, ways to change, like, you change the body, you change the mind, you change the mind, you change the body, right? And we've talked about Wim Hof breathing.
Yes.
And to me, so going back to unresolved tension and anxiety, how do you resolve it? It's not a simple, this is the only way you resolve it, but there are tools that I found very helpful to myself. And I know you have, and that breath work is one of them. um, and I know, and mindfulness, pairing mindfulness with breath work has allowed me to get more into my body, which has grounded me and keeping me here and now, and not just disassociating from it. Um,
But
and so,
just to go a little bit further, I want you to include as well the breath work, mindfulness, and faith. Like when I
yes,
combined mindfulness with mother, for me in my case, I kind of relate to mothering more. It changed a lot more than just pure mindfulness of meditation, for example. So faith, like just because you brought it in earlier, I wanted to bring it in your awareness because that is so important.
That's beautiful. I appreciate that. That's a really good point. Yeah, and I mean, I'm being developed in the faith area right now. I feel like I got baby legs, but the one of the key things is like bringing it to awareness, right? Bringing it to front and center of your awareness before you can be ready to grow, be ready to start making some changes that support your faith, support your intention, really support your growth. Uh, so anxiety. Um, okay, so going forward, there how we resolve anxiety. There's functional ways and dysfunctional. Functional meaning that it actually resolves and you're no longer mastered by it. Doesn't mean that anxiety doesn't exist in the system, because again, we are human. We are so interconnected to family, but not just family, the culture which we grew up in, right? Society. And so there's rippling effects to where um, anxiety comes from. Like there's also like gender role expectations. There's like you talked about the inner critic, right? That goes back to family. So the inner critic isn't just something that came out of nowhere. So typically, if you're looking at it again from the psychoanalytical point of view and seeing families as an emotional system, that the child learned it from the parent in some way. So let me give you an example. For me, growing up, I know it seems like a silly example when I'm saying it to myself, but I do the dishes. We'll say at like 6 or 7, my mom was like, "All right, you're gonna do dishes with me." So I'm doing the dishes, I'm washing them, I'm stacking them, and she was always like, it never seemed like it was enough. Sorry, the background noise. We're gonna give that a moment. Okay, there we go. It never seemed good enough. It's like, oh, you got to do it this way. And like, even if I felt like I had it perfect, instead of getting praise, right? Like, hey, good job, like really proud of you. It was a lot of critiquing, and how that gets internalized, right, within me is, oh, I'm not good enough. That's one way. That can be a way that, like a negative internalization, and that creates anxiety as well. And who do you think my mom learned the critical self from? Like, that's a small example, but most likely her mom or her dad. And I know that's where she learned it from, because I know some of her history, and it was very traumatic. I won't go too far into her history, but the case in point is, we don't exist separately in a vacuum. If you want to know where anxiety is stemming from, you need to look at your family, you need to look at your society and your culture, and you can start to understand how there are impacts along the way that introduce tension into the system. And then that inner critic is one of them. And that can manifest as well in like social settings. Like, you might find yourself beating yourself up, right? You've at a social setting, you really want to talk to someone, and you're like almost rehearsing what you're going to say to this person, and you get the chance, and then maybe your mind goes blank, or you don't feel like you contributed, and then on the drive home, you're just beating yourself up. God, I would have said this, I should have said this. That's indicative of the inner critic as well, and that creates tension in the body, right? It's occurring in the mind, but it's being stored in the body. That's my understanding of the inner critic.
But I noticed that as you're talking, there's two types of inner critic, and I want to talk. I want to just flow a little bit for a second. So I remember when I was younger. Let's use your. Well, when I was younger, I remember I had no voice in my head, and only when my brain got to teenage year development, when I became a teenager, I noticed that the inner critic became louder inside the awareness. Now, before that, it's not like the inner critic was not there. It was a feeling of disappointment. It was a feeling, like you said, when I was doing something that I knew was not enough for my parents, I felt like I was not enough because, yeah. And then I remember the inner critic voice coming into my mind at around teenage years. And now that I'm an adult and I've went through a lot of spirituality, I was able to silence the inner critic voice. But now I'm back at feeling the inner critic as a feeling, as a whole, as an attachment to what I'm doing. I wanted to know if you had experienced the same thing. or if you remember, or if you ever had any thought to um, the dialogue that's going in your head or the feeling that's going inside your
Well,
head.
can you give me an
So,
example? You did a good job of explaining where you are, where you've been, but can you give me an example?
so there's two. Let's do the example of you didn't say the right thing to a girl, and then on the drive home, often your inner critic might vocalize itself by you being in the car and saying out loud, "Ah, God, why did I do this? Fuck. Why did I do this? That was so fucked up." And then there's the other example of, let's say, on the drive home, then inside your mind, inside your head, you're going to say out loud, well, out loud, inside your own mind, you're going to say the exact same sentence, but without your mouth, right? You're just going to be in
Mm-hmm.
your head and you're going to be like, fuck. Why
Mm-hmm.
did I? And then there's the other one, the feeling one, that's just on the ride home. You're focusing on the driving. You have no time for thought, but you're feeling like fuck, that feeling of shame. That's an inner form of inner critic. So you kind of got these three ways. But I noticed, like I remember as a child having, because you're so part of the world, you're so focused on the external world, because that's the only thing that matters. If you play with this toy or not, if your friend is saying this or not, like you're not inside at all. You're just you and the like the outside world. But then when you get to teenage-esque years, 10, whatever, then you go more inwards. I guess there's a part of the brain that gets created that allows you to self-reflect. With, I think it's the frontal lobe, maybe, I'm not sure. um, and I remember that change of like, holy shit, like I've got a voice in my head. And I remember hearing from other children that if you like, it was the big joke, like if you talk to yourself and you reply to yourself, you're insane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then as an adult, I silenced that inner critic by realizing that I not this body, and it was talking for no reason. Like I was not paying attention to it anymore. I didn't have no attachment to it anymore. And then it just went quiet. And but the inner critic is still there, but in a feeling form. Like I hear it from my inner being now compared to a voice in my mind. And
So
yeah.
keep going. I mean, or
No, I wanted to know if you've experienced that. If I don't know, like I've been in my head for a long time, and I've really analyzed my transitions, and it's more like I wanted to vocalize it and to flow with it, to see if one, you've ever experienced that. Two, if you do hear a voice in your head, like how, because I'm sure there's a lot of range of inner critic and people, and to, I don't know if it matters to identify them or not, but
Mhm.
I don't know.
Well, I do have plenty of moments where I'm talking with myself, so I guess I'm insane. Uh,
Well, that's
and
the thing. Like even saying that, like when you realize that you are not your body and your
yeah,
ego, it's like you want to be friends with it, right? And that thing of like, oh, I'm insane because I talk to myself, or because I have these feelings, or because sometimes I get the feeling of like I want to kill this person. Like I've got so much rage. And the fucked up
hmm
thing too is not even a year ago I felt those feelings towards my daughter, my wife, and I felt so much shame. And that's where you were talking about like there's two types of healing, the two type, I don't know what words you were saying, but as you're trying to confront these traumas in your life to change, there's the functional one and the non-functional one. But that one is non-functional when you say you're
right,
insane.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll give it like, even as we're talking, I'm laughing because I don't know if you can hear the horns in the background that are going,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's a tendency here in Puerto Rico for these drivers. Someone lays the horn on, and then everyone decides they need to lay their horn on. I've never been anywhere where this is the case, and you could see it as like a way to resolve the anxiety of being in traffic or being stuck. Like it's like, do you see me? Like that's one interpretation of it. So that, to me, that's not functional. You're still in traffic, and yeah, you're blowing off steam, but like that's, for one, it's just loud. It doesn't get you out of traffic. It just makes you maybe feel better in the short term, right? So using that metaphor, and like that's a real life example of that is applicable to this as we're having this podcast. Um, Being upset at an external circumstance and screaming at it, like whether you're screaming at a situation on your drive home because you didn't say the right words, that is dysfunctional, and that it's not wrong. Like, you're not doing something wrong, but it resolves short-term the tension, but you're going to do the same pattern again and again. To
Yeah.
resolve it, you have to understand where that rage is really coming from. And so, and like, using the example of you and your daughter, right? Like, you love your daughter, but simultaneously you had this anger coming through that you couldn't deny. Um, if you just continue in that patterning, that's, like, let's say you vent to your wife every time, or you go kick the dog or something, right? That's a way that you're, for one, transferring your energy, anger, but you're not truly resolving the patterning. So how do you how you resolve that? It's not always just, this is the clear cut way to do it. And I want to also say, I'm I'm learning this stuff right now, so I'm still working through it.
Dude,
um
it resonates so much. Just yesterday, like last night, I noticed, because like you were saying, the patterns of, let's say you get stressed during the day, and then at the end of the day, you need to go to the gym, or you need to go to your
yeah,
training to blow off some steam. And then that day where you can't go to the gym, you're going to be a fucking mess because you didn't have that valve release.
exactly.
And then yesterday, what I was noticing is, because I've been, one of my great intentions is to stop exploding because of the. So I'm gonna. Yesterday, I saw the movie called The Father with Anthony Hopkins, and it goes through the story of him dying of Alzheimer, but it's from his perspective.
Mhm.
So they show like parts like, one day he doesn't recognize, and they really show it like they change actors. So you really get confused as you're listening to the movie to really get yourself in the point of view of what it feels like to have Alzheimer, and to wake up to somebody total stranger walking in your house, and then like being, am I getting punked? Like, is this a person that's going to want to steal me? Or especially like if it's a male and it's your son or whatever, and you just don't know, like the anxiety that arises from
Yeah.
that must be out of this world, because you don't know, like, this is a brand new person you've never met before because you don't remember. And as I was listening to it, I was thinking to myself, like, why am I doing this? Like, because it was really affecting me in a traumatic way. I was like, wow, I really don't want to watch this movie. But at the same time, I was like, this is such a, walking towards discomfort, practice to get better at understanding. And in the end, I really realized the thing that hit me the most home is like, if I continue with these patterns of exploding when, and I really have been trying to change these patterns so that when my wife does something, that I don't snap. Just those little tiny little snaps of, why'd you do that? Or can you just do it this way? If I, not if, but yeah, if I don't learn to practice, to really put in the work to change myself, let's say one day I get Alzheimer, I'm going to be fucked because I'm going to go back to those same patterns over and over again. And from the movie, it really showed, like, if you're not flowing with life, holy shit, like, you could have a hell of a time if you get Alzheimer when you grow old. And as I was pondering, and as I was feeling such discomfort for who I was, because I'm still exploding, and I'm still, because he was hurting his family, and without knowing, right, it's Alzheimer, it fucks you up. And I'm hurting my family with the knowing that I'm fucking up my family, but yet it is like what you're talking about. It's traumas of the past. It's, ancestors. It's like things that I'm working on to heal. And the biggest thing is my cats, when they start meowing, I know that they want love. I know that they just want my attention from me to pet them and to be there for them, but
Yep.
it drives me nuts. Like, it boils my blood, and I know. And as he was meowing, and it's amazing how God is kind of going through my cats to show me things. I was like, no, I'm practicing. So as my cats were meowing at me after the movie and I was going through drama, I was listening to it with an open heart and sitting with the feeling of, I hate this kind of thing, but practicing to, that's my reaction now. If my cats speak to me and I get this feeling of annoyance, my reaction is to pause, to breathe and to sit with it. And I spent 15, 20 minutes and my cats didn't stop. And it was so weird. And I was like, thank you for the practice. And today I feel better. And that's kind of like what you're talking about. I feel like the little practices that you bring in your awareness and in your consciousness to get your healing done physically. Like it's a physical thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's I love that you point to the example of the animals in your life, because animals are uninhibited, right? Like emotions, they're a great teacher, in my opinion. Uh, and it's interesting because as you invited me into your narrative of, you're like, I'm trying to do this work, this internal work. Essentially, like, what the fuck? Why are you grabbing my attention right now? Like, you're really annoying me.
Yeah.
Because the mind is essentially, right. Our mind has this tendency to go, I need to do this thing because I need to get back to that place where I'm at peace and it's spiritual. It's like, well, all of that is right here, right now. Can you be in your body? Like, this is what is right now. And the manifestations of God, right? And the people in our life, from our caregivers, like parents, to our siblings, to our romantic partners, and our kids and our animals, so on and so forth. They're all there in support of us, and us in support of them. So that is the work, to be here. And it isn't. I also relate with what you're saying with, like, hey, I need to do this work. I'm trying to work on myself. It's like, yeah, we know that's what we're here to help you do. And so, like, good on you for catching that. Because
Yeah.
yeah,
It applies to so even like as the trucks are beeping, and I'm sure the idea comes in your mind, like, I'm just trying to do this podcast. I want it to be nice for the listener. It's like, no,
yeah,
it's nice. Like, to, let's say at one point you would get the practice of, like, I don't know, like whatever you choose to do, the horn would stop beeping. It's weird.
yeah.
Like it's,
So that's totally part of it. So going back to, like, the internal narrative, right? As you're talking, I'm trying to listen to you, right? And I can feel my irritation rising because these horns are going in the background. But simultaneously, because we are the witness, I'm witnessing this happen and going, how perfect is this? We're talking about tension and anxiety, right? Well, there's also external tensions that are entering and impacting our experience. So horns are pretty mild, but then there's things like, I'm going to zoom out and get a little more deep-hearted, I guess, if you will. But war, right? War has a massive impact on our collective conscious and the anxiety that goes into the system, from how it affects the earth, the air, the plant life, the animals, the humans. Like, everything feels the effects of this this conflict. So when conflict enters the system, it creates tension. And when that tension goes unresolved, you get the symptoms of mental illness, anxiety. Um, are you following me with that?
I'm following you 100%.
Yeah.
It's,
So
yeah, continue.
that so there are also external factors, um, that are completely outside of our control. I mean, as kids, it starts with our parents because we come into the world dependent. Um, as adults, you have, like, if you're working for someone else and you have a boss who's I mean, tyrannical is not the right word, but doesn't see you, doesn't care really about your personal life, your passions, your dreams, and it's just about, the corporation and the demanding. There's That would be another example of adding stressor, right, to your life, external stressor. And yes, there are ways to change your perception of the experience, and that speaks to your development and your own awareness as a soul, to where, yeah, maybe you can mitigate and be in that environment and still thrive in that environment. But sometimes it's okay to say, you know what, I see how this, like, if you use the valve analogy, this is adding more and more pressure into my valve, and I don't know how to resolve it. So I can either avoid it and move on to something else. It will probably manifest again because you have to get to the pattern of what's going on. Um, or you can face it head on, and maybe you have a conversation with your boss, right? You can't go have a conversation with war. You can have a conversation with the survivors of war. You can have a conversation with, um, yeah, you can have a conversation with, I got hung up on the survivors of war.
Well,
Um,
there's also there's another aspect to that. that I want to put in is that there's also the stressors that are unavoidable, which in the end only can be resolved if you're okay with death. Like, for example, if you work in an office, right, and
Yeah.
it's either the air conditioning is on or it's off. And if it's off, it's 30 degrees inside the office. If it's on, it's a nice 21 degrees. But the humming of that fucking air conditioning creates an impact, creates a and higher frequency vibration, like, when you don't even realize the AC's on all day long, and then all of a sudden somebody turns it off, you're like, holy shit, that was loud, and I didn't even realize
Yeah.
how fucking loud that was. But then you get such a peace because now that humming is gone. Well, those type of stressors of life, you can't run away from. It's just, it is what it is, and you will create stressors. And it's weird how, like, some life, you can't avoid those stressors, but you can mitigate them. You can, like, what you're doing. But I wanted to make it clear that you can't run away from all of them. Life is just you're frictioning at all time. Like, your cells are living, dying, and that's a stressor, that's a tension. And it's a matter of, like you say, your perception. And if you really surrender to death, I guess, to the idea that you're growing old and that's okay, and you're gonna die, that's okay. And um that's the last kind of part. So let's talk about the previous parts. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Well, if you can try to run away, you can try to avoid it, but the ramifications are, let's say you're running away from the boss every time, or you're going to lose your job, and like that's not. I'm not saying that like you should be afraid. I'm saying like there are ramifications to avoidance, or like let's say it's a relationship. Like for me, I've struggled with um, allowing myself to be vulnerable in a partnership. And I won't go into at the moment the details of all that, but I'll just say that for the longest time, I avoided commitments to my partner, and um, that puts my own body and mind in a state of dis-ease, because it essentially is like having one foot in, one foot out, right? So what I'm finding, to your point, is facing it head on is the best way.
Yes.
Um, and how so
Correct.
this comes right back to family structure, though, is as a child, if you had secure attachments, and by secure attachments I mean you received um, a high amount of love and attention and support, you have a better chance of making lifelong bonds and cultivating relationships.
Is it
And
okay if
so,
I disagree with that one?
sure, absolutely, please.
Yeah, so the reason why I disagree is, from my growing up, I grew up surrounded with love, like 100% love. My mom was so loving. My sister, I grew up with girls, so I had a lot of female energies around me. And female energy has this protection kind of feeling and love. They're really loving being. And growing up as well as a French Canadian, oh God, there's no there's no limit. Like, we could talk about sex, anything, drugs, anything. And it's a thing that French Canadians, like, we're just not shy. If you go to Montreal to party, you'll see girls are going to come to you to ask you to dance or to buy you a drink. And it's just the way it is.
Sure.
And maybe it's Spanish culture as well. I see it like there's an openness about it. But the reason why I say that is that you never know, not you never know, but you never, and that's where I'm a little bit confused. Is it that it was my path, that God kind of puts, who knows how you're going to perceive something. So for example, uh, my trauma in my body just made it so that I even though I had love at the formidable years and I had love on so many levels, one little trauma made it so that there was a filter of negativity that made it. And I agree to your point that if you don't look at things head on and you run away from it, for example, like me, I was always running away from my body. It made it so that all of my experience that I experienced created a trauma. So yeah, trauma, like at every second, because everything that I was experiencing was through the lens of, I don't love myself. I am not love. Even though I received love from so many ways. And then after a while, when you do receive all of that love, and let's say the child got the perception that he's not worth it, for example, then that love kind of becomes a trauma, because
Hmm.
the more the mother loves you, the more you feel unworthy of that love, and the more the trauma gets created, and it kind of almost creates a negative effect of the more love, the more trauma. So it's weird how the paradox of love is so powerful.
Can we can we
Yeah,
slow down for a moment, just because I don't know if I'm following you
yeah.
completely here. So you said the more the more something something, the more the trauma gets created. I think I'm struggling with that language. So can you give me an example?
So there was a mushroom trip that showed me that at a very young age, I felt unworthy. I don't know what
Okay.
happened. Yeah, I felt unworthy.
But hold
And
on,
yeah,
this is really important to me. If you don't mind me,
no,
I want to hear your story, but I'm going to keep pausing you because I need
of
clarification.
course, of course.
So you're about to go into a memory. You
Yeah,
don't, and you said you felt what?
unworthy.
Okay, so you felt unworthy. Can you get overall sense of what your age was at that point?
Oh, as soon as I could. My first memories, but I
Like
didn't know
very
that I
early.
felt like that. It was a physical pain
Hmm.
made it so that my awareness did not want to look at my body anymore. So let's say, like, I look like almost at the example of my, well, for me anyways, I had the anxiety stomach pains growing up,
Hmm.
and I'm sure it comes from the traumas of my parents and everything like that. That anxiety made it so that I was so uncomfortable with my body that I didn't want to do nothing. Like, I didn't, my body was not worthy. Like, there was a negativity lens about my body that made it so that like I didn't love my body. And that is so, and that because I didn't like my body, because I didn't like myself, because at a young age your body is everything. You don't realize that your soul, or at least my parents never kind of, they were not spiritual, right? So the body is everything. And because I didn't like the physical sensation of my body, the more love that I received, the more that it would create trauma. Do you
Can I ask? I'm going to ask you how did you know you were loved? Like as a kid, how did that love manifest to you
like
from your
from my
parents?
parents?
Yeah.
Okay, so my mom, she would always want to kiss me, always want to hug me. When we
Hmm.
would watch TV, she would always invite me in her lap so that she played in my back or in my hair.
Hmm.
When I cried, she always encouraged me to cry and to feel my feelings and to talk to her about anything and everything.
Yeah.
And
How about your dad?
my dad was not around much. My dad at a very young age, he would work until 6, 7 p.m. So, when you
Hmm.
go to bed at 7, you never kind of see him. But like
Yeah.
at around 7 or 8, and on the weekend, if my dad was around, he was happy. I saw my dad mad, like seriously angry, like 4 times in my life, like
Yeah.
ever. That created trauma too, in a way, because it's weird. Like, your mom tells you to feel all your feelings, but your dad is always so positive and such a hardworking person and always smiling and would do anything for you. It, it,
Hmm.
it created a weird perception. So, to say that, like, beautiful, like, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well, I heard a lot about that you had a very good relationship with your mom so far, but that your dad was working a lot, and it sounds like he loved you, but that he wasn't as available emotionally as your mother.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
my dad is a quiet person. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you had a relationship with your dad who's
Oh yeah.
just okay.
Yeah, yeah.
But so far, like I'm not trying to therapize
No,
you,
no,
by the
no,
way.
of course.
I'm just listening to the dynamic that you had
Well,
with your mom versus
I
your father.
it's from my perspective, I noticed that the trauma, like, because it all comes from the paradox that if you're there for your children, right, with love, and then the odds are that they're going to be less traumatic when they grow up. They're going to maybe have less things to go through, and I disagree with that, because in my scenario and in a lot of my family scenario, I grew up we grew up in an environment full of love and support. And what dictated how much trauma you accumulated is from the own person's perspective on life. And for example, if an event would happen, if they thought this way, then they would heal. If they thought that way, it would make it so that the next time they had that type of thought, it would create a trauma. And
Sure.
nobody can really predict or even decide or even control which way a person will think when an event happens. And that is the beauty about faith. Like it's almost like I was destined to think that way. When that situation arose, I could have been courageous. Like it was really 50-50. And somehow, somewhere, my thought decided to think that way, maybe because, like you say, DNA or whatever, but more to that, faith, more to that. Yeah, that's where I'm at anyways. But to say that if you give absolutes to, not not that you're doing it, but if the books or education gives kind of absolute, and the idea that if you only give love and you try your best to support, like right now I'm with my children, it's such a big thing because my wife has read so many books on how to behave, right? To not first label, never label your kids. That's one of the big things. Even with like
Hmm.
saying you're beautiful, like to avoid that, to say, look at, like we always try to encourage their behavior, like, oh, look how well you dress. You're the one that chose your clothing. You're the one that decide, like, you look beautiful because you did an effort. It's not that you look beautiful just because you're beautiful. Or look at how just that's an example of like not labeling at all. And the
Right.
other ones is um, there's the paradox that if you give love to a child that is exploding, then the child is going to learn to explode more and more because you're giving it love while it's doing an action that is not good for its future. So then at
Right.
one point, you're stuck creating almost a trauma, and not violence, but like being hard on the children when they do explode in order for them to unlearn a behavior that is not going to serve them in the future. So the paradox of love is insane, like from my point of view.
Absolutely. Right. So I love listening to you talk about this because again, so I'm not a parent, right? You are. So you have firsthand experience with being a parent, but you also have firsthand experience with being a son and a brother.
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
have I have experience being a son, a brother, and a partner, uh, boyfriend. But I still like I'm going to push back
Of
against.
course.
I'm going to push back with you and say, okay, so you use the example of when your children, if they're exploding to get attention, and all you do is enable that and say, oh yeah, it's okay, like
Well,
yes, you're
yeah.
reinforcing a behavior. Um, the the point of secure attachments is that when okay, so first of all, there's secure attachments, which means that I feel safe. And because I feel safe, I can trust another person to be there for me in some way. And I can be there for other people as well. An unsecure attachment is typically from what the research, not just a textbook, but textbooks tend to be informed by the research, at least at the college level. Um, what it shows is that when specifically unsecure attachment, when mom or dad is not either mentally aware that the child has a need, so they're not even there to be present, like this, we're getting into neglect essentially, um, then that child has the message sent to them, which is my needs aren't being taken care of, won't be taken care of. And maybe they even cry and scream and throw a tantrum and they're still not getting the attention, right? Because it's all an expression, to use like the cat example, meow, 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 to say, look at me, I want love, I want attention. And when it gets to that point, it's clear that those needs aren't being met. And if they go unmet, that's going to continue to manifest. Now the question is, how do we cope, right? Like we're going to have this imprint on us that says like, it, in this exact example, potentially there's going to be the impact that says either I'm not worthy of receiving attention and love, and that becomes like a narrative that gets carried, or maybe it's I'll do it all myself, right? So then you get
Yeah.
like the person who's a really hard worker. Now,
Yeah.
society rewards the hard worker for sure, but there's still a trauma there that could still have anxiety and other things. So I'm just saying that
Yeah.
from strong attachments, secure attachments, which happen at the family level, and families can take an array of forms. It's not just mom, dad. It can be mom and mom, or dad, or what have you. But as long as there's a strong support system, it shows that you have a better chance of having long-term healthy relationships. Um,
Well, listen to that though. So let's say, so that's, I love what you're saying. So let's say the child gets the one where I'm going to do it myself and now becomes a really hard worker. And that serves them until a certain age. And then at one point, let's say 30 years old, it'd be us right now,
yeah,
find out that, hey, it's not serving us anymore and we need to heal that. Is that more beneficial than the child that got the absolute perfect environment where they 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 feel secure, and now they're growing up feeling secure, so now the trauma is no longer secure, but there's going to be a new trauma that's going to be created, that maybe they're not going to be as hardworking to succeed in life, and now traumas are going to get created now instead at 30 years old. So either you create a trauma at 30 years old and you heal it at 3 or 5 years old and you heal it at 3, or you don't create the trauma at 3, but then life doesn't reward you and now you create a bigger trauma at 30 because you, well, the trauma doesn't have to be created, but let's say you end up as a person that's really lazy and really has a difficulty to, it's not that it's bad, but you're not going to get rewarded out of life to maybe fulfill your ultimate goal to, I don't know, travel, help, like stuff that really matters to a person spiritually. So it's like the paradox is confusing there. Which one
well,
is more deserving? Which one is better?
I don't think it's an either or, black or white
Yeah. Oh no, it's
scenario.
not. Of course not.
But I also don't have any reason to think that someone who has a lot of support at the home level received. Okay, I'll use my family as the example. Growing up, I had both parents in the home, and both my parents are still married, which is I applaud them. It's pretty impressive. Um, 4 children in my family, including myself. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she had a lot of depression, and very young. She had 4 kids by the time she was 26. Okay, education level about high school, and my dad worked outside of the home, so my mom had 4 really young kids, and she's raising them essentially by herself. I mean, my dad, not by herself, but as far as like the actual child rearing, the discipline, the doing the school homework with all the kids, right? That's a lot for one person,
That's
right?
insane.
Resources are stretched very thin. I mean, like I can tell you how many, I can't even tell you how many times I heard about money in my home, the concern about money, right? And that has an impact on the psyche. That shaped my mind of being very money focused and like making sure I had enough, right? I'm just what I'm attempting to give context to or paint here is I don't think that a supportive family is going to make lazy kids. I do think that there are lazy kids come out of um, families with less opportunity as well as with lots of opportunities. I don't pretend to know all the factors that shape that, but as far as the traumas go, I think my belief is that if you can be more loving, give as much support and awareness and attention that you know how to, and improve from the generation before you, then we're moving in the right direction. Um,
100%.
so,
Yeah, I do agree with that 100%. Yep.
and as far as age, so like using the example of age, like so the work, I think I like what you said. You said, well, look at like this kid that maybe he or she copes in a way that says I have to do it all myself. So they excel at school or they excel at business and they're having success in the world, but then they hit a point where they're like, you know what? Like, yes, I've had success, but goddamn, this isn't sustainable. Like, this isn't serving me anymore. I need uh, something more, right? And something has to change. Um, that's that work. Like, it's beautiful because then that means there's room for healing and growth at that. Like if you're coming from a secure attachment or an insecure attachment, I don't think, to your point, that they're going to be safe from trauma. Trauma's in the world.
Yeah.
It's not just the family. It's the family, which is connected to institutions like school or a church or a mosque, religion, connected to politics, connected to, like, it just goes out and out and out. Like, there's no um, place that's safe or exempt from the real world. We're here. We have to face it head on. But the family allows you tools, if we're preparing our children correctly and well, to have healthy coping mechanisms for stressful times, right? For hard times. The ones who are more ill prepared tend to suffer. That's the reality. So feel free to push back or feel free to jump in on
No,
this.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, no, the thing is that kind of like resonates in my world because I see it from what your perspective, from what you're talking about. Like I kind of got the awareness, like, hey Dom, like you're pushing back for no reason because you are like with your children, for example. I'm pretty sure that what you're going to explain is I'm kind of doing with the children, where when you are calm around a child and you really make them feel like they're enough, that they're safe, because that's one thing with my daughter is like, I am, and she's like, I am love, and then I say I am, she's like, safe, I am enough, I am
I
wise.
love it.
We do that all the time. I
Oh
just scream
man,
it from the other end of the room. I am, and she's like, love, I am safe, I am enough.
that's
And
so awesome,
she
man.
always ends up, the last one is I am not, I am, and she's like, not this body. It's like, it's really cool. um so I make her feel really safe, and at the same time I do communicate with her about um hard work and like wisdom and everything like that. So you have, it's not that I need love to be, I need self-love, right? I need
Yeah,
self-love to be able to do this.
yeah,
If I do not, if I'm not confident in myself, and if I don't love, if I am not love, because even I love myself sometimes create a separation as if, but I like it. I love myself. I love Dom, and I am Do, like the soul or whatever. If I wouldn't have
hmm
this awareness of love, I wouldn't be able to be so. I love it so much. I wouldn't be able to be so present with her to allow her a safety, because through my self-love there's a safety net that just rolls over the house that is undeniable. And but what I was saying is that because I, in this society, I get so confused at the idea, like, you look at Joe Rogan or you look at really successful people, the only reason that they got super uber successful is through the crazy trauma that they experienced before in their life. And without those traumas, they wouldn't have been who they are. And then once you create that uber successful environment, then you can go into some crazy experience and living and healing that I'm never going to be able to experience because I didn't have the self-discipline to become a millionaire or billionaire or whatever, or to do my own business or to invest properly, because I was given so much love through my parents that had a lot of trauma. So I was given a lot of love and a lot of safety, that from a point of view, like it's almost like the net, the safety net that I was given was full of like big holes that I could just pass through. So it was kind of fictional. As much
hmm
as they provided that love, it was real love, like it came from a good place, from a good intention. But because they didn't have the self-love to propel those teachings, it didn't stick. It didn't that's what I'm uncovering from talking to you right now.
that's beautiful. I was about to say, like, this is so beautiful because it's very common, including in myself in our narratives, to go, I had a really loving childhood. My parents are great. And it's not that they weren't great. It's not that mom and dad weren't loving. I mean, there are plenty of examples where people's parents weren't. But in your narrative, getting a little more of a zoom out, you can see maybe we're like, wow, yes, my parents were present. They were very loving. They gave me what they knew how to give. But I can see some areas where, um, things are missed, or I went unseen, or I'm using my own language. That's not your language, but
Yeah.
I hear more in what you just said of like seeing something that you haven't seen before, maybe, or
Yeah.
noticed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
100%.
that's the value of, that's what I'm finding as a student in grad school right now. That's the value of this framework, is seeing the family as a system, and that your parents are once kids, and the same forces that shaped them are shaped you. It doesn't mean there weren't some changes and tweaks. You know, your mom and dad probably made some improvements, and you're making improvements the way you're parenting your kids. And that's the hope, is that we continue to give love and support, and give the best tools we can give to the next generation to do better, right? And to have the best life experience they can have. That's my take on it at the moment. Um,
100%. And to tie it all back, like, I want to apologize first for pushing back, but the pushing back made it so that I got some healing right now. But to tie it back as well, that I noticed that the more knowledge that I'm acquiring from people that are knowledgeable, like you're in school, and Corey, and the people that have the knowledge, that read the books, that are actually trying to implement that in their lives, are creating a change inside of me that is allowing me. It's weird, like when I heal myself through you guys' knowledge, through you guys' work, I can see it, a difference in my parents, like in my mom and my sister, my sibling, my in the people that surround me, without even, like, I'm not teaching them anything. I just me being me. And when they say something that it creates tension, for example, and I speak up through my self-love and my courage, and I say, no, no, you know what, mom, maybe this is faith, and maybe this, maybe that. It's I'm healing past a generational, like, it's exactly what you're saying. So thank you so much. And I want to hear more about, like, the actual now knowledge of what you're acquiring, like in school, from what you're doing. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
brother.
yeah, yeah.
It's an honor to have these conversations, and I'm learning as well. I mean, I'm learning through school, but I'm learning through this conversation. It's enjoyable to see how these tools can add greater clarity to seeing, for me specifically, seeing my parents and having empathy for them. Because, like I said, my mom had a really traumatic childhood. Like, she lost her mom in a car accident that she was in with her mom and
Oh,
brother at age 4. Her father struggled with alcohol abuse, womanizing. Her stepmom was bipolar and comorbidity, so she also abused alcohol and pharmaceuticals. And so this is the home environment that's giving rise to my mom and impacting her personality. And like, she was someone who, when she'd speak up and ask for attention or love, she would get physically abused at times, or she would get verbally just torn down, right? Like, so talk about an inner critic. You internalize that as, I'm not worth shit, essentially. And that, so that's a backdrop to say, like, with this framework, I can have so much love for, I see the child that's in each of my parents. And at the same time, you end up grieving the child that's in you for the parts that were missed. And your parents didn't know, like my parents didn't know better. So I can't hold them accountable to that. I can still be angry. I can still feel all those feels, but I can have grace and compassion. And it's amazing as I get older to have adult conversations with my parents, and to see that, like, wow, I see things that they weren't aware of. And if they're receptive, I can learn from them and they can learn from me. And it's beautiful to see how, like, now they have grandkids, to see how present they are with their grandkids. And my mom's even said, I feel like I'm getting a second chance at times with child rearing, because you know, I wasn't, I was just naive as a young adult, and she didn't have the tools. She was not given the tools as a kid. How could she have those tools, right? So um, this knowledge, this work, is preparing me and giving me a greater understanding and compassion and grace for my family. That's what I would say, in my tribe and the people around me. And so when I was listening to you and Brandon talk about anxiety, it just pinged. I was like, for the longest time, in fact, that was part of the work that brought me to work with ayahuasca, was I had so much anxiety, and I didn't have good coping skills. I didn't have the tools needed to self-soothe. Um, they weren't working for me anymore. So this stuff is great.
And more primarily, like the self-love. It's weird how it was fictional, as much. Yeah, like before ayahuasca. I mean, before the work has really started. Um, it's so important. Like I can't harp enough on like the practice of acceptance and self-love, because through my awareness, it's that's the only thing that I can really say like that changed everything. Like
Yeah,
everything.
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Have with so what I will say about what I'm learning with coping mechanisms, we'll say, or coping with
Yes.
anxiety and stressful situations. So we had talked about like using the valve analogy, where like, sure, you could explode and blow up and yell and react, and that's like letting out a little bit of steam from the valve, but it doesn't resolve, right? So
And even positive things like going to the gym, you're creating a habit.
exactly,
Yeah.
yep. Going to the gym. So there's also like self-soothing. This is where you get into like addiction.
Yeah.
People that,
Cannabis. Yeah.
right? So cannabis, alcohol, substances. These in moderation can be used, and with intention, in beautiful ways, ritualistically. But if you're constantly going to these externals for release, it's not sustainable, and it has a lot of times um, consequences that are not benefiting you or the people around you. Or that's what I found. But an understanding that addiction, my understanding of addiction is that it's an attempt to self-heal. It's an attempt to self-soothe. So like, I'll use my example of me in this first quarter of grad school. And I'm just being very transparent. I've I've been drinking probably 2 or 3 beers at least, uh, every other day, sometimes every day, while I was in grad school, just because I'm like, oh God, this is like, I don't have time to be still. I don't have time. Like, I've got so much reading to do. I've got commitments, this, that, and that, like all this narrative in my head. And it's like, oh, here's my reprieve. I'm just going to enjoy some beer. There's nothing wrong with beer. However, that psychology, the idea that like, I don't have time to be still is indicative of how I'm operating. And it's essentially saying, I don't have the tools to cope with this. I'm going to use externals. Well, it worked. I got through the quarter, but it's not sustainable. It's not the experience I'd want to have going forward. Um, what I've taken the time to do on this break is to get back to meditation, get back to intention. Um, but the point of me saying I've used substances to self-soothe. And that's one example of coping. And it's not in my opinion, it's not a sustainable way to cope. There's better ways. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So what have you learned like in terms of tools? Like because one tool that I found yesterday is really the practice when it comes up, but it took freaking like almost a year and a half for my mind to even accept. Like it's not like it was weird. Like, yeah, a moment in time after watching a random movie that made me feel uncomfortable, made my mind say, today's the day that I'm just gonna practice. And all of a sudden the cat comes in, God, because for me that cat, that gold cat, represents God in so many levels, and it frustrates me because I know what it's trying to teach, but it's not that I was not ready. I don't know what it was, but yesterday was the day that, like, okay, okay, and that's messed up. Like, was it just that
So
time?
what's the practice? You said, you asked me what tools, and then you said there's a practice that you've
Well,
started.
well, that the idea of practicing, like when the situation arises, like for whatever reason, and it's been happening more and more lately, that when I'm like, I choose my practice when I can, like, it's what can I accomplish? It's almost like the Jordan Peterson way. What kind of things around you are you able to conquer and put into practice to train your brain to get better and better at dealing with this trauma or this feeling or the
Yeah.
idea that you want to run away. And I've been practicing a little bit. Like the first one was driving. Am I capable of just forgetting about time? Like, even though I had been trained in my life, all my life, that when I'm in my car, I have to get there as fast as possible and come back as fast as possible, because I told myself I like driving fast, or I like, driving. And the practice that I've been incorporating the last few months is like, okay, am I able to just not look at the light ahead? If it turns red, it turns red. If it, because then I look at the counter. Oh, I see 5, 4, 3, 2. I accelerate because I don't want to get a red light, because red light are, I don't know, hell for me for whatever reason. Am I able to not look at the red light and just look at the sky? And if the red light shows up, to stop and to try practice, because when I feel bothered about that, to just stay there and don't get pissed off. So that was like kind of like the beginning. And then yesterday, my cat, I was able to handle my cat, and I'm like, all right, for whatever reason now I've built up, and I guess I'm answering my own goddamn question.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's sometimes exactly what holding space is, right? In these conversations is sometimes we start one place, we think we're on a trajectory, and before you know it, it's cyclical. Like, oh, okay, I think
Yeah.
I figured this out.
Yeah. It's,
So
yeah. So one of the tools that I would suggest to other people is there something that you can tolerate and practice, to tolerate even more, or even to get not bothered by that, and then work your way from there. Like a little
yeah,
bit at a time.
yeah, yeah,
What tools did you learn lately?
yeah. So I'll say, I said this in one of my papers as well to my professors. We had to write a cover letter and express like what we've learned. And it was for a college writing class. And I said, I don't feel like I am a college writer. I do feel like I'm becoming, like I'm in the transformational process of becoming a writer, and I'm improving. And that's how I feel about things that I haven't learned, but I'm learning, cultivation of certain practices, like returning to breath, slowing down. Are you familiar with I think it's a Navy SEAL saying, uh, slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
No, but
Yeah.
I know where you're gonna go, because the breath and I have been one for a little while. But please explain.
Well, I have a tendency to, my brain goes, if I'm going to be successful, I have a software program that likes to run in my head that goes, if you're going to be successful and you're supposed to do, be a grad student, be a partner that is considerate of the household, and you've got family that you need to attend to, and so on and so forth, then you need to like be super quick about things. And what I find is I make more mistakes because I'm missing key information as I'm in a hurry. And even with like reading information, hurrying through my reading, I don't absorb as much, right? So that saying helps me. It's just like one little breadcrumb of reminding myself, slow down. Slowing down, especially if you do things, more accurately the first time around, there's less to clean up if you have to go back and do it again. Um, so slow is smooth, smooth is fast is a little mantra that I've been hearing again and again for the last couple of years. How that's been manifesting on my school break has been in just intentionally being in my body, right? Like you and I are both relate with being in our minds so much. Um, and we also find breath work to be quite helpful. And I don't know if you saw, I did a little Instagram post yesterday, first time I've done one in a while, or video. And it was just explaining one of my breathwork practices that I like to do. And it really helps me confront anxiety within myself. And it doesn't resolve it all, but I find it to be a healthier way than drinking to reduce it. Right. And I take the palm of my hand, I place it over my heart, I close my eyes and I bring my awareness to the beat of my heart and how that feels against the palm of my hand, while simultaneously I take 2 quick breaths or inhalations through the nose, and then I do slow exhalation through the mouth. All this happening together, right? And I find it's a great practice in getting me out of my mind, which is focusing on either past or future things, right? And worrying and getting all knotted up. And it brings me into the present moment of what is real, my body right now, and what's happening in my body. And this practice, very simple. It doesn't cost me any money. I don't have to go get pharmaceuticals or get external substances. Within this maybe takes 3 minutes. I feel so much more at home in my body, right? It's like that home frequency. So it's a nice reset. That's what I've been doing.
But do you know the because there's a technology behind there. So technology, I mean, there's a what you're doing, the two deep breaths in. You know that as you shallow breathe, the pockets inside your lungs, they collapse, right? And more get collapse as you shallow breathe. That practice, taking a deep breath in, will not replenish those pockets. But if you take that the double, I didn't know you did that. The deep breath in that is twice like that, and then
Yeah.
go all the way. That
Yeah.
is one method to replenish those air pockets in your lungs. It's one of the only ways. So people that do that want to work on their lungs, that's one of the greatest practice to do, just to get more lung capacity. It's physically proven that your
Yeah.
pockets regenerates when you do that, or
That's
whatever they call.
awesome. I did not know that. I just know. So this is the like, this is to me the higher intelligence within all of us, right? Like
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not just like I'm doing this on my own. I've been exposed to Wim Hof and listened to Aubrey Marcus, and I'm sure I've captured some different breathing methods along the way through that. And then you and I have talked about breath work, but I I know how my body feels and how my internal world becomes more encompassing. Like I'm more comfortable in my body, and
So can I
so
teach you
I
something?
please,
All right.
please.
So while you're doing this, so you've got the hand on your chest, and you're doing the
Mm-hmm.
double pump in and then slowly out. You you've done meditation before. You know how to concentrate on your third eye? You know, like the awareness that you bring on your third eye. I'm sure you're already doing it to bring in the Tao or whatever. I don't know. Have you been doing that during that practice? To
Uh,
concentrate on on top of
no.
concentrating on present. So let me explain this. That's the beauty of it. So you do this. So you got the hands to allow yourself to really be present with your body. So now your hand touching your heart, it gives you an awareness of your entire body. And the more you bring your body into your awareness from head to toe to the tip of your fingertip, the better. And then
Yeah.
as you're doing the double breath in, if you bring as well your awareness of the body to your third eye. So imagine your entire sensations of your body being in your third eye, meaning in that I call it the Tao now, because after a while, your mind will silence, obviously, well, not obviously, sorry. Your mind will silence, and you're going to notice that the edge of your awareness as you're concentrating on your third eye will expand, and it's going to feel like you have no head. There's a meditation out there from this guy that wrote a book, anyways, and they call it the no head practice because and Eckhart Tolle talks about it. So as you do the double pump, you breathe, you concentrate on your third eye with your awareness. It's as if you're looking at your eyelids, but it's really, and for me it is like I make believe that my eyes are looking at my eyelids, and that makes it so that I can concentrate on my third eye, the frontal part of my brain. Like I actually feel like a point there. I bring the sensation of my body inside there, as if you make believe with your imagination that your entire feelings live there. They don't live like your toe feeling is not there anymore. It's in front of you. Even though you feel it down there, you make believe that they all belong in front of you. And with faith, with Madre, with God, because your body does not belong to you. So when you bring the awareness of your body into your third eye, you're really concentrating on Mother. You're concentrating on your this body that is not you, and you're looking for once, well, for me, when I realized I practice, that you're looking at you. And when you look at this you in your awareness and you're spending time with you, Madre, which is God, it's not you, it's you, but it's not you. Anyways, your feelings, your body's feeling, um, it's going to explode in your awareness, and you're going to feel like the edge of your awareness starts expanding and you become one with the universe. And that's how I was able to silence my mind, because it's
Beautiful.
something that I do it like I do at all time. Even with your eyes open, you're going to the more you practice that, the more you realize you can do it at all time. And
Yeah.
that's why the inner critic went away,
Yeah.
because I'm always present with the body, with my breath, and with Madre through the third eye. Like that's the only thing that matters. So when I look and I'm driving, or even with my cat yesterday, I'm able to do this just because my awareness is there. It's not thinking of anything else. It's looking at me. And that's my goal in life. And the knowing that if you stay there, you still have thoughts, you can still study, you can still learn, you can still plan, but you don't need anything. Like there's going to be no, it's as if you're not even thinking, but trust me, you are. And it's weird, but it just, yeah, that's silent mind in general. That's my trick.
And it's called headless meditation. You said.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I'll give this a. I'm gonna give this a go.
But headless
In the coming
meditation,
days.
they do it in a different way. They really make it. They make it so that the headless meditation, if you look online through that book, they what they do is they make you focus on the edge of your awareness, and as you're noticing the edge, you're gonna notice that like what you're looking at is like a screen. Like they
Yeah.
really make it like you're looking at a screen, and then you can deassociate yourself and really make believe that your entire illusion is a screen and it does not belong to you, and all you are aware. But I bring it forward more through faith, Madre. Yes, through the screen, knowing that this illusion this entire illusion is not real. Like everything is
Mm-hmm.
created from Mother, and it's not even me that's creating it. It's Mother with me looking at it. So I don't even take credit for like the table in front of me or my creation.
Well, that's. I mean, that's what I find with a lot of these breath work paired with mindfulness practices is a subtle ego dissolution occurs. Full blown ego dissolution, I've really only experienced with the aid of psychedelics, but by that I mean like complete lack of identification with this realm. Um,
There's
but
another one.
there's silent. Well, I've experienced a silence of mind to where it's just like you said, like someone turned the tape
Yeah.
recorder off. Well, it was me. I turned it off, and just being completely present in body and seeing how perfect everything just is as it is once you turn that narrative off.
Well, there's another physical part that happened only once in my life, but I can still reproduce it specifically. But so I was doing the Wim Hof breathing, and I was practicing this awareness because I was just
Mm-hmm.
getting into it, of concentrating on my third eye. And I had realized that I could not look at my third eye because I couldn't look at myself. And one day I was doing the Wim Hof breathing and I had Mother in my awareness. I'm like, why can't I look there? Why can't I keep my focus in my third eye? And it came and anyways I forced it. I'm like, fuck you, Dom, like I'm looking at you, like I'm looking at, and I remember crying, and Mother, and I realized like I achieved it. I was able to look in that third eye, and I stayed there, and I'm like, finally. And I realized like I couldn't look at myself. So it was the beginning of like self-love. But then 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, I was doing the Wim Hof, and now, well, I would smoke cannabis, and all I wanted to do is look at that third eye because I just wanted to see Mother, and the knowing that when I look at Mother, I look at myself, and
Yeah.
that was the beginning of self-love. Well, as I was looking there, I had learned, I had not learned, I had heard that if you, through that headless meditation, that if you bring all of your feelings into that spot in front of yourself, um, there's a possibility, anyways, and I achieved it. So what happened is that I brought all of my feelings, all of my presence in that third eye, and somehow, somewhere, I really felt like the feeling of my toes, the feeling of my fingers were in front of me instead of inside of me. And when I was able to project those feelings, my body went limped. Like I was on my back, but it went limp. It's my entire body went into a state of not even bliss, but like all my muscles let go. Like I was like butter, like I melted. And I
Yeah.
stayed
Yeah.
in that state for like a minute or two, and I was mind fucking blown because my feelings were no longer inside of my body. They were outside of my body, which left my body free. like free,
Wow.
and I was never able to reproduce it since. But
That's fantastic though. What a magnificent experience.
yeah, and because of that, it really solidified the idea that I'm really not my, like, these feelings that I think are my fingers or my toes. No, that they're there because I associate that it's my body, like
Yeah.
it's fictional. It's really fictional. And when I experienced that, my buddy was beside me. I was like, holy shit. Like, anyways, it was
Hey
amazing.
Dom, I need to put a pause for
Of
now
course.
on this conversation because the restroom is calling me. But we can pick it up in about 3 minutes or 4 minutes if you
Yeah.
like.
Let me pause. Yep.
Okay.
And we're back. Oh,
Yeah. So
at a minute, just before. So to continue on the awareness of the body or whatever, the one way to practice is, let's say you're rolling on the ball, for your body, and you just start like with a stressed area. Even like if you press on your thumb on your arm, like in a stressed area on your body, practice like of bringing the awareness in, doing the breathing, but really using your imagination to bring that part of the body in front of you, and you're going to notice that it's going to melt way faster than if you would just do what you did before to stretch or whatever. And it's a cool little practice to start that thing now. Yeah, but yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
oh, I love it. That actually makes me think of how when I stretch, sometimes I'm doing the physical motion of stretching, but I'm thinking about, oh, I have to read this paper, or I'm thinking about
Right.
cryptocurrency or whatever. Right? I'm not like being present with the actual movement of my body. So I like that idea of
Yeah, but more
really,
than that, like, it's really the practice of bringing that sensation to that third eye. So it's like
yeah,
it's even better because you're actually doing something. You know?
phenomenal. Yeah, it's
Yes.
one that I've not tried, so I look forward
All
to
right.
giving it a go. Yeah. So in addition to breath work and mindfulness and these kind of exercise, internal exercises, um, ways that there are other tools that I like to use that help me process and integrate the different lessons that I'm learning, whether it's academic in school or um, more like the philosophies or spirituality, and they're all interconnected. They're really not separate. But I do journaling sometimes. I'll do just free drawing, like stuff that you'd see like a kid draw and put on a refrigerator. Like that's the quality of these drawings sometimes that I'm doing. They don't need to be Picasso's. But I find like it's in fact there's a whole field called art therapy that is something I might look into. But it's a really great way to process lessons and anything from like psychedelic journeys, shamanic journeys, to meditative journeys, or just like if maybe you having conflict. Actually, that's really what it is. It helps resolve conflict sometimes, journaling and cartooning or drawing. Um,
And no
so
matter how shitty the drawing is, you think that it has a benefit?
yeah, and the idea is as I'm drawing, it's not like I'm not drawing. Yeah, of course, it'd be cool if it turned out incredible, but I'm doing it without concern of making messy lines. Like I'm just allowing myself to draw. So like the other day, I drew a mushroom with like a mushroom tree, and then I was drawing like Andean crosses in there and different symbols, um, and then I was like, man, that'd be so cool. I haven't gotten myself to the level where I can do this, but I'd love to draw like a human being, like sitting in the lotus position with their hands, and at their arms are human, but then their hands are becoming the roots or like of a tree, or like the stalk of the mushroom, like blending in. So like those kind of things will just like going through the process of trying to draw that, not being focused on the result, but just enjoying it, has been mindless, so to say. Like to me, it's some of the same result is you're getting out of that tape recorder mind or that software and allowing yourself to just be. So that's been
There's
a very
a
helpful
there's
process for
a
me.
there's another tool that came up into my awareness. I was talking to a friend, and he uses the voice, but not just the voice from the throat. So as he's doing like just chanting or the noises, like when you feel that noise coming out from the center of yourself, just the awareness of, like, when you talk, even if you'd be talking to yourself, I feel like that's a tool that really helped me, where when I talk to myself, if ever I need it, like, let's say, and of course in a positive way, right? The same as if you journal, like you were in the previous podcast. You don't just journal that you're an asshole, really journal that, journal about your ideas and the practices and blah blah. But talking to yourself out loud has been such a valuable tool to me. And when I bring it from the center of my voice, like, it goes lower, I feel it like coming in from the heart, and just doing like and humming
Yeah.
really reduces my anxiety. Let's say I'm really flaring up, to take a deep breath in and doing that, like, it resonates inside of me, and it comes from the cats when they purr, like, it's yeah, it's so peaceful.
It sounds like it. Yeah, I also use song and humming and whistling
Yeah.
as a as an expression of worship. Worship almost sounds like I'm saying worship, like battleship, but as praise, we'll say, and offering to Great Spirit and divinity. And I find myself ecstatic doing this. And so, yeah, making music, really expressions of creativity. Also, ecstatic dance. It's not one I've done much of, but the one time I participated in ecstatic dance, I thought it was such a cool exercise because the idea is like, there are no scripted movements, if you will. Like, feel free to just let your body flow and go as it comes to you. And it just made me aware of how much of my life I'm operating on scripts still, from body movements. Like, this is okay, this isn't okay. You need to look this way, or you need to act this way. And to be in a space where there's a community that encourages spontaneity, authenticity, uh, is quite refreshing. So again, it's not one that I participate often, especially with the pandemic going on, but um, it's one that I would enjoy doing again, and it's one I imagine people would benefit from as well, who are looking for breaking out of their routines a little bit.
And it's
So
crazy. I love how we're wrapping up, like how we're bringing everything together into, like, it's the little practices. Ram Dass talks about that, like any and or, like
yeah.
any little stupid practices that you have that is towards your growth. And that, I mean, any of them will create self-love, because you're actually doing a minute here, a minute there of something that resonates with you, no matter what the practice is. It'd be listening to your cat meow, it'd be to dance, like you say, or I love it so much. Taking the time
Mm-hmm.
to work on yourself, going to school, like you, like, if you're able to be in class and to bring faith as you're listening, I'm sure would, like, it's working on yourself as you're working on, learning something. um like me driving to traffic, it's the little moments that really makes it worthwhile, and it really helps, like, on so many levels.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Wow, like, I am gonna bother you to come back as much as you want, because I'm getting so much healing from this, and I hope you as well, my friend.
For
uh,
sure.
it's amazing. Do you have anything to say before we leave?
Oh, and I just appreciated being on your podcast, and thanks for having me, and thanks for sharing you know your your stories as a father, as a son, and then of course as a friend. It's been enriching for sure.
Oh, right back at you, my friend. It takes a lot of courage to be able to talk about your journey. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And this, I would say, the podcast you're doing reminds me that this is a form of your self-love too. You're
100%.
right. So thank you for doing your work.
My pleasure. In honor of Monkey and Frank. Frank. All right. Love you guys.